All right, so we have multiple different film history approaches that we can take, and the first one we're going to take is periodization and perspective. And this one has a lot of subgenres to it. The first one being tech eras. And tech eras is just that there's different technology that they're able to use. For example, there was silent films originally, and then we moved on to digital, black and white, into color, stuff like that. So we had different types of films based on the technology restrictions. We also had industrial systems, and this is just how the businesses were structured. For example, we had like a lot of Hollywood things going on in the past, but nowadays we have more independent studios. We also have national cinema movements, which is like when there was a national style going on. For example, like military films during World War II. We have different film movements with certain styles taking forefront. And we also have dominant filmmakers such as Steven Spielberg and other things like that. In addition, we also have genre and formal trends. These are just the dominance of certain media forms. For example, big movies were like really popular. And then we also have different things nowadays, like for example, short form is very popular in the form of reels. And we also have content and exhibition. The content is just basically how it's shown. So back in the day, we had to go to the movie theater or we had to rent out blockbusters. But nowadays we have streaming services, we have YouTube, all these different ways that we can approach the filming industry. So that's one way we can look at film history. Another way we can look at it is through normative and alternative histories. So that's basically the difference. Is the normative is basically the norm, what was generally happening at the time. So those were like the dominant trends that were happening, big Hollywood grand movies that were sponsored. And then we have alternative accounts, which are the more like experimental sort of films. So those are the films where we've got, they're more experimental, right? So we might not have like a clear story. They might be trying out different camera angles, different types of cuts. And so that's usually what pioneers the next era of normative accounts. So normative accounts would be like developing existing working abilities. And then alternative would be creating new possibilities, which could later turn into the norm. We've also got units of analysis, so we can look specifically at institutions, genres, styles, technologies, audience practices, and individual filmmakers. All right, so now let's focus more on the major stylistic shifts that had occurred. So we've got different things from novelty to go into narrative, where we change from trying to introduce new things into trying to create very enticing stories. We've also got the introduction of sound, color, and widescreen. With stronger technology, we're able to have a lot more of variety in our sounds and our colors, and we're also able to fit more in the screen. Then we also have the classical Hollywood system in comparison to like modernist and alternative movements. And that's basically just that before we used to have like a system in Hollywood where we produce movies the same way every time. But nowadays we have a lot of different options in addition to that Hollywood movement, with the more new filmmakers arising, as well as more experimental techniques being used. And nowadays, since we're going onto a global market, we have to keep in mind the global customs, adjust our film to meet those customs that we plan to show our film in. And we have to make sure that we have language translations, dubs, subtitles, all of that good stuff in the movie. So we can look at some institutional and technological drivers as well. So we can see how the industry was organized. So how the studios were owned. Sometimes there was censorship that would go on in certain studios, so we couldn't have, for example, like sex scenes within our movies back in the day. And we also would have finances being a limiting factor in what would be able to be produced. Like we can't have this certain special effect because we don't have the money to do so. We'll have to have some other low budget replacement for it. And we've also got exhibition and audience technology, basically just how the audience can experience the film. So like we've got IMAX nowadays, but back in the day we didn't have any of those. So we're limited, more limited in like the options that we had to show the audience. However, like of course the limitations only just add to the creativity that's needed by the filmmaker. We've also got some better production technologies nowadays, leading to like easier filmmaking. Like we've got lighter cameras, and instead of having this really bulky camera for 4K, we can now just shoot it with a relatively small camera. We can even shoot it with our phones. And so we've got lighter cameras, but we also got stronger cameras, and in general, better gear for everything else, like sound gear, and etc. And finally, we can look at the market forces. These are just things happening internationally. or like different ways that we can merchandise our film. For example, if we look at Demon Slayer, we've got people that are like merchandising all the characters. They're selling like Funko Pops. There's all these plushies and all that when it comes to these types of films. And the last historical changes that we can look at are like the stylistic change patterns. And this is just that in general, we have incremental change over time. So rather than instantly adapting a new thing that was experimented on, we'll see these movies slowly adapted over time. For example, initially cutting between two different scenes that are happening at the same time, that wasn't a widely accepted option because it was thought that the audience would not be able to follow the story. However, over time, we now see this happening in every single movie, it seems, because it's such a powerful tool, and we just had that incrementally added over time. We also have different things like hybridization, where we're combining different genres together in order to create like a super genre. Like we have like sci-fi combined with horror. We have a romance combined with comedy. We can have all these things that are mixed together to create even more unique stories. And finally, we've also got cyclical returns. That's how you see it. And this is basically just playing on our nostalgia. So, for example, we've got our most like a really recent show. It was called WandaVision. That was really good by Marvel, and they played on the fact that we had nostalgia for old time sitcoms. So they have the first few episodes would be in black and white. We'd move on to color, etc., etc. It was really cool to see that like old style in a more modern take. And yeah, that's just basically how historical changes in film art have led to that's just how we can analyze the history of film in order to have a better experience today when we're actually approaching our own films. So yeah, if you want more random talks about what I'm learning in class, be sure to subscribe, and yeah, check out my other videos on like linear algebra and all that.